Before we talk about these two, there's one more Spyro title to cover. With the new generation of handhelds, Sierra Entertainment, the publishers, decided to have the next Spyro game made for the Nintendo DS, and they got Amaze Entertainment on the job. Spyro Shadow Legacy was released in October of 2005. The story starts off with Hunter and Bianca departing Dragon Shores from yet another vacation. An unknown force soon pulls everyone into the Dark Realm, and Spyro is out to save the day. The devs decide to turn Spyro into an action RPG, and here's why. Quoting from creative director Scott Lang in an interview, he says, "It gets players more involved in the story behind the game, instead of just collecting things. You should feel like there's a reason to everything you do in the game. And just like all RPGs, there's a level up system followed with upgrades, which are neat additions for a Spyro game." In the same interview, Scott says, "Combat in this game is significantly more challenging than previous Spyro games. But I beg to differ. All the enemies in the game are complete pushovers. Most of the battles involve just mashing the attack button until they die. I mean, couldn't they have at least given Spyro a 3-hit combo? Cause this is how I thought action RPGs should be like." As I progressed more and made it to the first boss, I thought things would get better, but no. The fight was over in a mere 30 seconds. Alright. I'll give this game the benefit of the doubt that the devs were aiming for a much younger audience, which I highly doubt considering the dark theme and eerie music. Taking that into account, Shadow Legacy still suffers from one major flaw: collision detection. And I'm not making this up. Just look at this. And this. Now don't get me wrong, the level art and designs are beautiful, but the overall perspective makes it difficult to tell what's in front and how high objects are. Okay. Before we continue, I want you to toss everything, and I mean absolutely everything you knew about Spyro up to this point, out the window. Cause we're about to see a total rebirth. Enter the Legend of Spyro. So the big question is, why? Well, quoting from producer John Welsh in an interview, he says, "We wanted to actually set out and tell the story from the start. The story of where Spyro came from and how he came to have such a friend as Sparx." Further on, he states, "We could explore ways of developing the style and look into something that represented a maturing of the game and its environment." Chrome Studios weren't lazy on the voiceover either, considering they hired Elijah Wood, David Spade, and Gary Oldman to do most of the voices.
"Who are you? Do you know me? Where do I come from?"
With the iffy Spyro titles following the original trilogy, it seems the devs really put in the effort to make this rebirth a successful one. But how did it all turn out?
Here I come!
The Legend of Spyro: A New Beginning was released in October of 2006. The story starts off in a dragon temple, where a guardian named Ignitus was looking over dragon eggs while awaiting the birth of a rare purple dragon. The villain known as the Dark Master ordered an attack on the temple, which forced Ignitus to abandon the egg. It was later found by a family of dragonflies whom went ahead and raised the purple dragon, Spyro. Sparx' parents eventually reveals to Spyro that he's a dragon, which leads Spyro on a journey of discovery. Alright, the prologue is screaming the story of Moses. I mean, with the river and the adoption, only difference is that Spyro wasn't banished. Aside from that, the storytelling was decent, and the voice acting was top-notch. The comic relief David Spade's voice gave Sparx was perfect.
"What's the matter, little Spyro? You can't fly? Oh, that's right, you walk everywhere. That's too bad."
As you take control of Spyro, the first thing you notice is that everyone and everything looks different. Spyro isn't the confident, outgoing young dragon anymore. He's much more naive now, and this was intentional since the devs were aiming to make him from zero to hero. John Welsh also expands on the change in atmosphere in his interview. He says, "For instance, Spyro is on a voyage into the unknown, and the unknown can appear dark or isolated, certainly strange and perhaps even harsh."
Where's that little gnat gone now?
Now, to the classic Spyro fans, say goodbye to the Swifty Spyro and say hello to Combat Spyro. Now, I have nothing against this idea. It's just different. The combat itself is decent. If you asked me for a comparison, I'd say it's similar to God of War, but not as deep. Spyro now has a health bar and fire breath is limited, and he's got one standard attack, which unfortunately can't be upgraded. But what's upgradable are the breaths. The various breaths have different properties, which gives variety to the battles. What I really found to be an issue was the pace of the game. There were way too many back-to-back battles. Now, this would have been alright if there were a variety of enemies that required different strategies to beat, but you can overcome most of them with the same old method. Now, couple that with Spyro's small moveset, things become very repetitive. Oh, and don't tell me, well, classic Spyro had shallow combat. Yes, it was shallow, but the focus in those games were minigames and platforming, not combat. Many points in the game, it felt like a chore to play. Breathe fire, mash attack button, rinse, and repeat. Puzzles in this game are nothing more complicated than activating switches to proceed, and platforming is very occasional. The only thing I found refreshing was the different themes in each world, but personally, that wasn't enough to outweigh the repetitive battles. To put things into perspective, A New Beginning brought in a new generation of fans to a whole new Spyro universe, and this was actually what Chrome Studios wanted. Quoting from a producer, Don Meadows, he says, "We brought in new fans to the series, and we had created an emotional attachment between our characters and our audience, and that was really a big part of what we had set out to achieve." He further elaborates on how the team wanted The Legend of Spyro to be a series of epic movies you get to play. That's very ambitious of him, but I think it's very difficult for a game to hit the perfect balance between great storytelling and gameplay. But when it does, it's usually a masterpiece. In the case of A New Beginning, the storytelling and characters are great, but fall short with shallow gameplay. Development for a sequel began well before A New Beginning hit the shelves. This early start was so that the devs had enough time to introduce features into A New Beginning that would later be in the sequel. The Wii was coming soon, and the team wanted the new Spyro game to be on that too. They faced some challenges when converting the controls onto the Wii, to the point where they had to do a lot of recoding. The Legend of Spyro: The Eternal Night was released in October of 2007 on these systems. Events carry off shortly after the first game. Long story short, Spyro took down the antagonist, Cinder. She then comes to the good side and stays with the dragons. But ashamed of all the harm she's caused, she decides to flee.
"I'm leaving, Spyro. I don't belong here."
Spyro tries to stop her, but took a nap instead. Well, he passed out. In a dream, he learns of a mysterious tree. Shortly afterwards, Ignitus tells Spyro to seek out this tree.
There may be hope for us yet.
The plot is still the strong point of the game, but I wish they kept David Spade as Sparks. I'm really not feeling the new voice.
What? I can't hear you over all this snoring.
Other than that, I can see that the devs built upon the characters a lot more this time around, and also adding emotional bonds, like with Spyro and Cinder. But after playing through both games, the atmosphere can feel a bit stale and lifeless. Putting in NPCs like a lot of other action-adventure games do could have made the world feel more lively. As for the combat, there were some major problems. An example would be when an enemy charges at you from off-screen, it's impossible to predict. This could have been easily fixed if they hadn't zoomed in on Spyro so much. To expand on that, if Spyro gets hit, you're looking at a 5-second hit stun. I'm sorry, but that's way too much. Overall, I love what the devs have done to build on the story and characters, but once again, I still feel the gameplay falls too short. With many action-adventure games in the late 2000s being based off of cartoons and animated films, Activision felt that they had to make the third Spyro game more realistic with a mature tone. Michael Graham of Activision expands on this by saying, "Younger players are a lot smarter and more patient than they are often given credit for, and we aim to give them an experience that was similar to games and movies that have inspired our generation." Right off the bat, Lord of the Rings and God of War appears to be a couple popular titles they took some ideas from. And throughout the interview, Michael continues to emphasize on drifting away from the cartoonish look and putting more focus on realism. The Legend of Spyro: Dawn of the Dragon was released in October of 2008 for these systems. Interesting enough, a development team based in France, who goes by a name I don't dare attempt to pronounce, was responsible for Dawn of the Dragon. 3 years have passed since the events in Eternal Night. Spyro, Cinder, and Sparks were finally released from their protective crystal, but in the wrong hands. They soon escape with the help of Hunter and set off to reunite with Ignitus.
We'll follow the river. It will lead us to shelter where we can rest.
As mentioned before, characters and environments have a realistic touch. It takes some time getting used to this change, but once you do, everything looks pretty amazing. Though the game does have vibrant colors, I couldn't help but notice an intense amount of glow in some parts. I don't know if it was just the version I was playing on, but it got kind of annoying. And finally, they've added some depth to the gameplay. Spyro now has light and heavy attacks, a block, and a grab. These definitely made the battles more engaging compared to the past two titles. But unfortunately, this was hindered by a poor camera. Having an enemy lock-on system could have really helped this issue. On top of that, in some parts of the game, the devs kept the camera in a fixed position, probably so they could get that movie-like angle. But for the most part, it was more of a nuisance than anything. This is why a game shouldn't try too hard to be a movie. Now, I'm not taking anything away from the cinematics and characters. In fact, they were awesome, except Sparks. After hearing the same jokes 3 games in a row, I just wanted to crush him.
I could watch this all day.
Dawn of the Dragon marks the last entry in the Legend of Spyro series. And I have to say, although the overall gameplay fell short, the trilogy did tell a strong story.
It's over now.
So this is it?
You know, right when I thought they couldn't diverge from the original Spyro series anymore, they go and prove me wrong. Well, let's just see how deep the rabbit hole goes. Throughout gaming history, toys and video games rarely went beyond taking a secret code from your toy and inputting it into your game to unlock something. But Toys for Bob saw much more potential in the realm of combining toys and video games. A while after The Legend of Spyro had ended, Activision wanted to revive the Spyro franchise, and they turned their heads to Toys for Bob. Initially, they were gonna make a really mature Spyro game. Quoting from President Paul Reich, he says, "Let's raise up the age range for him. Let's appeal to the kids over 16 up into young adults. Let's make it tough and bloody." Wow, now that's horrifying. Just imagine a bloody Spyro game. While working on the concept design, the team realized that this wasn't Spyro, and after testing many other ideas, they settled on making toys and incorporating them with game consoles. The game was released in October of 2001 for these platforms, and was called Skylanders: Spyro's Adventure. The game came with 3 toys, Spyro being one of them, and a portal device. First of all, I absolutely hate what they did with Spyro's appearance. He literally looks like the product of a gremlin and a troll getting it on. I mean, who on earth came up with this design? Who knows? One very important thing I want to point out is that this isn't a Spyro game. Saying Skylanders is a Spyro game is like saying Super Smash Bros. Is a Mario game, just because Mario's in it. Bob for Toys basically used Spyro's name to kickstart Skylanders. The plot has nothing to do with Spyro whatsoever, which begs the question as to why it's called Spyro's Adventure. It's like saying Pokemon Yellow is Pikachu's adventure. And you know what's really funny? Spyro isn't even the main attraction in the box art. He's shoved to the side like a failed experiment. So yeah, calling this game Spyro's Adventure is very misleading. Okay, more importantly, how's the game itself? Well, Skylanders is about you, the player, who's regarded as the portal master. You have the ability to take control of mystical creatures called Skylanders. Overall, the game is geared towards a whole new generation. In other words, children. With that in mind, the game is made very easy. Too easy in my opinion. There's a level up system, but it's nothing deep. You can honestly just spam any attack to win. Oh, you're dying? It's okay, just switch Skylanders and bam, full health! So is Skylanders a bad game? No, it's not. It's just probably not for you, unless you're very young or completely new to video games. The whole concept of controlling a live action figure in a video game is rather innovative. And honestly, most of us were hooked on collecting Pokemon cards back then. So I can imagine a similar kind of hype for kids to collect Skylanders too. Now I know there are 2 more Skylander games, but I honestly don't consider them to be Spyro games anymore due to Spyro's lack of relevance in them. Overall, just like Crash Bandicoot, the Spyro series had its ups and downs, falling into different hands throughout the years as each developer attempts to revive it. But in my opinion though, the original trilogy is timeless and will always be in a league of its own. I can only hope that one day, someone will be able to bring Spyro back to his former glory.
It's a sad sight, Sparks. Just look away.
Come on, Spyro. Take a little break. Let's watch the show.
Well guys, I guess this wraps up our journey with Spyro. Thank you all for watching, and once again, here's a little riddle. Solve it, and the secrets of our next retrospective shall be yours. My home's not that lively, with not much more than music as my hobby. Sometimes I'll play poker with my buddies, one who is a cheater. As I recall my first adventure, it involves saving my little sister from an ugly, jealous old hag, who's also an egocentric douchebag. I learned new things every day, thanks to a mole who gave it away. I even met a shaman along the way, and in all my games, he was to stay.